Hey everyone, my name is Alexandra and I'm a watercolor artist. As you guys have probably noticed if you've been on my channel for a bit, is I love to paint things that are in nature, whether that's flowers, mountains, trees, all of those things. One thing that I noticed when I started painting is I was struggling a lot with color mixing and knowing how to do that. So today I want to show you guys how to make your paint colors look more natural and really well suited to honestly anything you're painting. So we're gonna do two different paintings. One of them I'm gonna show you guys non-mixed colors, just straight out of the tube, what they look like. And the second one, I'm gonna show you guys how to give them a really nice and more natural look. Let's get started. For supplies today, you guys will need 2 cups of water. I have one for clean, one for dirty water. A napkin for drying my paintbrushes on. For paintbrushes, I'm using Opus Allegros numbers 2, 4, and 8. I have two pieces of paper today. Both of them are 140-pound cold press watercolor paper. If you guys use just one, that's totally fine. And for paints, I'm using mostly a combination of Windsor and Newton's ultramarine blue, cadmium red, and cadmium yellow. Main colors that you guys will need is some sort of blue, yellow, red, and I'm going to show you guys different ways to mix them to make them look more natural. So the first painting that we're going to start with is our one on our left, and that's going to be using bright colors straight out of the paint tube, and we'll just see how they look and go from there. All right, so we're going to start with our green paint. I'm mixing it on my palette. Already you can see how bright it is. And we're just gonna paint some simple flowers for this tutorial. So I'm gonna start with the stems. I'm using my number 2 paintbrush, and I'm just gonna paint a little flower bouquet with 3 different flowers. So again, right away you can see how bright this green is. Typically, if you're outside and you're looking at flowers, this isn't exactly the color that you're going to see, but we're gonna keep going with it. We're gonna stick with it. So I'm gonna paint some leaves in. For these leaves, I'm putting the tip of my paintbrush down and applying pressure as I pull back. So I do have some more tutorials on how to paint things like watercolor leaves and watercolor flowers. I'm doing this one a little bit quicker, more for the sake of showing you guys the colors. But just a quick reminder, when we're painting leaves, I'm using my brush to my advantage, and I'm using that tip to get the point at the end of the leaf. And then I'm applying pressure as I pull back in sort of a C shape. So just do one more there. So now that those are painted, we're gonna go in and we're gonna paint 3 different colored flowers. So the first color that I'm going to do is my yellow paint. Now this yellow, just at first glance, it is actually already a decently natural looking color because it's not as bright as some of the yellows you get, but you'll notice that some yellows that you paint with straight out of the tube have a very bright and sort of neon look. So this one is starting out pretty good, but again, you can see the really bright contrast with the green. So now we're gonna go in and we're gonna paint a blue flower. Again, I'm not doing anything too crazy. I'm just trying to show you guys the difference right now. So now I'm gonna go in to my cadmium red paint. And we're gonna paint our last little flower here. Right now, as things are drying, I just want to add in a little more detail to show you guys with the same amount of contrast that I'm going to use for my second painting. But with my green, oh, hold on. Accidentally smudged my first flower. Let me just smooth that out. Okay, so with my green, I'm just gonna go back into the leaves and just add a little bit more detail. Now I'm gonna go into my blue flower and just add a tiny bit of shading there as well. And then we'll do the same with our red and yellow. Okay, so now that we're finished with that one, you can see that the colors are really vibrant, which is nice, but I want to show you guys again how to make them look a little bit more natural. So on this painting here, we're going to start exactly the same way and paint with our stem, but instead, so I'm using the same green paint that I have here, but what I want to do is, I'm just going to clean my paintbrush off so I don't get my yellow all dirty, but I'm going to go in to my yellow paint and I want to add a little bit of that to the green. So again, just really warming it up. So we're going in, we're adding some yellow, and I already, when I tested on my napkin, I can already see that it's so much better, but I do still want to tone it down a little bit. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add a tiny bit of that cadmium red that I was using. And it's just really going to tone down this green and take it from very bright, vibrant, but not very natural looking to a nice natural looking, more mossy green. So now we're going to do the exact same thing that we did with this painting on the right side here. So I'm going to start by painting my thin lines for my stems. And you can already see the difference. So I actually used the exact same 3 colors that I used for this painting, but just by mixing them together, it really tones down the harshness of that green. So now we're gonna go in and paint our leaves. And I'm just gonna mix some more of that because I didn't quite have enough of the color that I wanted. So again, right away you can see such a difference. I find that especially when you're starting out with painting, color theory is something that can feel very intimidating and overwhelming. And if you've never done anything with it, you don't always know what colors to mix to get the effect that you want. So this is something that I often practice where in my paintings, especially when I'm doing things like leaves, one of the main things that I do with green is add that tiny bit of yellow, tiny bit of red, depending on how mossy I want it to look, but the red really just tones down what can be sort of a harsh, unnatural look in a green paint. So now that some of these first leaves are drying, I'm just gonna finish this step right now and add that same bit of extra dimension that we did to the painting on the left. And I'm just adding some shading to one side of each leaf. So this is just a super, super simple way to add some more detail to your leaves when you're painting. And then just because of how I mixed my paint and how much water I had, the stem looks kind of light. So I'm gonna go over it one more time just to make it a little bit darker. But again, right away you can see the difference with just mixing a few more colors into your painting. So now we're gonna keep going and we're gonna add in our yellow flower. So again, as I mentioned before, to be completely honest, the yellow that I'm using right now is already pretty good and pretty natural looking. It doesn't have that neon color that some other yellows do. So I'm just gonna show you what we can do with this flower to give it more interest and make it look even more natural looking. So one thing that I challenge you guys to do is take a look at some pictures of some flowers, of some things out in nature, and see what it is specifically that you notice about them. So again, with these flowers, I'm not painting any specific flower. I'm sort of just doing a pattern here. But when you look specifically at flowers that are yellow, say daffodils or sunflowers, either of those are a good example, yellow daisies. When you look at them, you see the yellow color, but if you're looking at a picture, often you see hints of other colors showing through and shading and things like that showing through. So one thing that I could do with mine is I could add the tiniest bit of the cadmium red that I'm using and just give it a bit of warmth and a bit more depth. So by doing this, I'm having a little bit more of a mix of colors stand out and show through. And again, it's very similar to this first painting that I did, but it gives it that much more interest and dimension, which, especially when you're painting things in nature, that's something that you constantly want to be focusing on of, okay, what colors do I actually see? How can I make this stand out more? So now we're gonna go to our next flower, to the blue one. And this one here, I wanna do that kind of same concept and mix it with a tiny bit of that red paint. So again, by doing this, I'm just toning down that blue just a little bit. I might have done a bit too much there because it's looking kind of purple, but that's okay. And I'm actually gonna switch to my number 4 paintbrush here just to get the bigger size. So again, I'm stealing a little bit of that red, mixing it in, and I'm painting the petals. Okay, so now that I've done this, I actually can go in and I still can take some of that brighter blue, but just by mixing it with a bit of the red, it gives it sort of a more natural undertone. And then when you place the blue on top, it's gonna stand out really nicely. Okay, so we might add some more detail to that still, but we're just gonna let it dry for now. So next thing, I'm going to go on to the last flower, and using that red color, which was very bright and a little bit harsh there, I'm gonna do sort of the same thing I just did with the blue, and I'm gonna mix in a tiny bit of that blue color just to tone it down. And then I'm gonna go in and I'm probably gonna add some yellow too once I start painting. But I'll show you guys right now that even just by mixing in a little bit of blue, now I think sometimes people panic and think, oh no, I don't wanna turn my paint color blue. But what they don't realize is that is actually just giving it a really nice, I had a bit too much water on there, a really nice, rich color that again has a lot more depth to it than the straight up red does. So right away, you can see a difference that we have between the two flowers. So yes, for sure, you definitely see very bright flowers when you're out looking at them, but there's ways to give it less of that. These are the primary color, still keep the vibrance, but just shift it from that harshness that sometimes you see when you buy just a basic paint set straight out of the tube. So I wanna do one more thing with our leaves, and that is adding a little bit of yellow. So this technique is called glazing, where you paint a color over top of another color. I do have a full tutorial on this, but what I'm gonna do is I have a tiny bit of yellow on my brush, and I'm just painting that over top of parts of my leaves. So I'm not doing the full leaf, but again, what this is doing is this is just adding more depth, dimension, and interest to my painting. Now, as I did with this first painting, I want to go in and add those details to the flowers just to make it stand out so that I'm not losing any of that by sort of toning down the colors. So we'll start with the yellow, and I'm just going in to the paint, and we're just going to add some detail into the flower just to make sure that we're really keeping that vibrance that is so fun and so beautiful when you're looking at flowers. Okay, and then we'll go next to the blue. And again, for this, I'm actually just gonna use straight up blue rather than mixing it with other colors. But because I've given it that really nice, natural looking undertone, you'll notice the difference compared to the other painting that I did. Now, I don't always paint with just basic colors. I definitely use some paints that are already mixed to a color that I want. But this is such a good thing to practice when learning color theory, and yeah, just trying to figure out how to use paints, and also really stretching your thinking, your skill, your ability, your creativity when you're painting by knowing that, oh my goodness, I don't have this color. Okay, how can I make it? How can I make it look like I want it to? So for the red, I am gonna mix it with a tiny bit of that blue just because I don't want the harshness of the red that I have. So doing a tiny bit of mixing, and then I'm just following the same concept and adding those details. All right, so by taking a look at the two paintings side by side, you can see all of the differences in just what such simple changes make by adding a tiny bit of either the contrasting or complementary colors to the color that you're using. So this is something that I challenge you guys to try. Like I did here, I challenge you guys actually to paint both versions of it, because it really gives you a good idea of what you're doing when you're color mixing. If you guys have any more questions about color theory or anything like that, please make sure to leave a comment below and let me know. Also, if you haven't checked it out already, I do have a video on the color wheel and using complementary colors, which does talk a lot about the fundamentals of what this is. If you followed along, please make sure to take a picture, share it with me on Instagram. I love to see what you guys are doing and what you're learning. Feel free to ask me any questions on there as well. And lastly, if you haven't already, make sure to like this video and subscribe to this channel. We'll see you next time.